Broadcast is now starting. All attendees are in listen-only mode.
Good morning and good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to today's webinar, and thank you for joining us. My name is Leah Wiggum, and I'm the Executive Director at the Paso del Norte Institute for Healthy Living at the University of Texas at El Paso. I also serve as the Live Smart Texas co-chair. Live Smart Texas is a coalition of organizations and individuals who work together to address the state's obesity epidemic, especially in children. Before we get started, I just wanted to make some housekeeping announcements. This webinar is being recorded and will be archived along with the presentation slides on our website at msdcenter.org. If you have any questions during the presentation, please enter them into the chat box. We will have time for Q&A at the end of the presentation. I will now hand it over to Joel Romo and Tim Schauer to start their presentation. Speak up. You can make a difference.
Good morning, afternoon. My name is Joel Romo with Texana Public Affairs, and I have the opportunity to work with different clients, including the Cooper Institute, It's Time Texas, American Heart over the years, and others. And we are excited to be here today and provide you an update on the 86th regular session.
And I'm Tim Schauer. I'm with Cornerstone Government Affairs and work with Joel through the Partnership for a Healthy Texas. The Houston area has a group called Healthy Living Matters, which is a local coalition focusing on childhood obesity that has been one of my large clients in the area of good public health. And I also work for a Medicaid managed care organization that is dedicated quite a bit of time and resources to improving the health of children and mothers in the Houston area. That's Community Health Choice in the Houston area. So we get started. You want to hit the next slide? We're going to try to give you a little bit of an update on where we are with the regular session and kind of some of the big bills that are important as it relates to healthy living. And then we're going to talk a little bit about effective advocacy and how people who even think they can't or shouldn't advocate have plenty of opportunity to participate. Obviously, the Texas legislature is open government. It is participatory government, and it only works when people who actually know the issues participate. So hopefully after we get to the end of here, you'll have a better idea of A, what's going on, and B, if indeed you want to get involved and let your voice be heard, ways that you can do that regardless of what where you're employed or what you do or some of those other limitations. So I'm going to throw it back to Joel to talk a little bit about the 86th.
Sure. So where we are right now, and again, this is an opportunity for you to learn more about how you can get engaged, but we also want to kind of tee it up and let you know what's currently happening at the legislature, what things look like, and where you can get involved. And so right now, we'll give you a little overview. There's 60 days left. The legislature adjourns May 27th. They meet every odd year for 140 days. There are over 7,000 bills that have been filed, and they have deadlines. The deadline to file bills was earlier in March, and thus there was other additional deadlines to start kicking in April and mid-May when bills have to be out of committee. So this is where the fun begins. It's also kind of one of the scariest times because amendments start flying. And then just last night, actually in the wee hours, the House Bill 1, the state budget for the next biennium, was adopted by the House unanimously. And it was about a $250 billion budget, which now goes to the Senate. The Senate will has been working on their version, and they'll substitute and do their version of a budget. And then a conference committee will take the differences of both the House and Senate budget recommendations and then come up with the final budget by the end of the session. And that committee will only be made of 5 House members and 5 senators appointed by the respective chairs of each budget committee. And why is a budget important to you? Obviously, that is where a lot of the funding for school finance will go, potential funding for school teacher pay raises, and administrative folks from across the school districts. There's also where they will attempt to do property tax relief. So there's a lot of different moving components in the budget, as well as some programs that we'll get into later that are I guess you could say, riding along the budget in hopes of becoming law. In addition, there's numerous school safety pieces of legislation that are moving and funding for school safety in the budget, but the school safety legislation is moving separately. That's taking up a lot of key time for the lawmakers as they consider these proposals. There's also, as I mentioned, property tax discussions. Also about 1:30 in the morning this morning, the House Ways and Means voted out their proposal for a property tax relief package, which will take up a lot of debate in the House and eventually in the Senate as well. And then Hurricane Harvey has really taken the center stage for this session. There's a handful of emergency management bills that have moved through the legislature that were emergency items of the governor. And all these items that I just went through, school finance, school safety, property tax, and Hurricane Harvey relief, were priorities of the governor. So they should be moving a little bit faster. Also, I'd be remiss if I didn't say there is full day funding for pre-K in the budget that was passed last night. So all that to say, that is kind of where we are with the overview, and I wanted to set the stage so you know the timeline, the big bills moving, what's taking place, and where we are. And with that, we can go ahead and move to the next slide. So Tim and I are going to tag team this, and we're going to go over some key proposals that are moving through the process. And then you can feel free to make a note and ask your question when we get to the Q&A portion. But Tobacco 21, so that will allow the age to be raised from 18 to 21 for the purchase of tobacco products, including e-cigarettes. House Bill 749 was voted out of the Public Health Committee unanimously earlier this week and will most likely be on the House floor in the next 2 weeks for debate. And in the Senate, Senate Bill 21, it is our understanding it will be voted out of the respective State Affairs Committee on Monday and then eventually made set for the Senate floor for debate. So those pieces of legislation are life-saving and important, and they're making their way through the process. So you'll find out how you can find out more later in tracking those bills.
And not to jump too far ahead, but while we've listed 2 bills, some of this is just process. There will only be 1 bill that actually makes it to the governor's desk. And whether it's a House bill or a Senate bill really doesn't matter. These are linked together. They're called companion bills. And for those of you that remember your Saturday morning cartoons of how a bill becomes a law, that was based in Washington, D.C., but it's exactly the same in Texas. The bill has to go through basically 5 components: a House committee, full House, Senate committee, full Senate, and the governor's got to sign it. There's all sorts of caveats to those 5 steps, but the bottom line is those are the 5 that need to go through. So when you see 2 bills listed, those are the 2 primary vehicles that are moving that Joel and I will be talking about. But at the end of the day, only one of them will make it to the governor's desk, and it'll be identical to what the other one generally had in there. So the next bill that we wanted to bring up to your attention, because we're fairly optimistic that this is going to be the first session that recess will actually get its day in the legislature and have some attention to it. Several bills have been filed. The ones that were hard mandates are not likely to pass, those ones that have specific minutes in there. But the bill that we've negotiated with the school administrators and a lot of the folks that are very involved in education policy have agreed to is that we will be setting model policy for the first time in the state of Texas for age-appropriate recess. And the reason I say for the first time is literally recess is barely mentioned anywhere in the law. It is all left to the local school districts to set recess policy. And unfortunately, a lot of the school districts don't set any policy. They allow each principal to do it. And in some schools, principals that believe recess is important have it out there. In a lot of schools, they use recess as punishment. They do all sorts of really crazy things with recess. And most importantly, they've taken it away from a lot of schools. So we're trying to reestablish some model policy. That model policy will be developed here in Austin at the what's called the TSHAC, which is the Texas School Health Advisory Committee. That will then be posted out and sent to all the school boards. The school boards will have to adopt a policy. Now, they don't have to use the model policy. They still have local control, but it is at least a requirement that they bring the issue up of recess and as a board take a look and then implement it in their school districts. So we're optimistic that that bill will make it all the way to the governor's desk. We've managed to get quite a bit of people joined on and working together. And quite frankly, the only group that was opposed to us were the school administrators, the superintendents who felt like they were losing local control. By negotiating out the idea of it being model policy, we've addressed our concerns, and away we go.
And then on the next piece of legislation that you see there is child care standards. This piece of legislation is also moving through the process, and just this morning, the House version of HB 1808 has been set for a hearing next Tuesday in the House Human Services Committee. Now, the Senate bill 952 was just voted out of the Senate Health and Human Service Committee yesterday, and so that allows us to move whichever bill moves out of the first chamber. Then we have procedures that we can substitute and save time. But all that to be said, so this is the first time that bill is really getting traction. It was voted out of the Senate unanimously yesterday. And what that bill does is set minimum standards for nutrition and meals to align with the child care adult food program, as well as minimum standards for active play and screen time in our child care facilities. And this is an effort that's been led by Texans Care for Children, the American Heart Association, and supported by numerous partners in the Partnership for Healthy Texas Coalition. So that support, that momentum, the visits that have been made by the different different organizations has really helped us get these pieces of legislation to where they are now. So this is another one that we feel good in terms of making an impact on childhood obesity by setting these minimum standards. The next piece of legislation regarding healthy food financing, House Bill 1252, this proposal obviously sets some loans or grants for entities that are looking to move into a food underserved area and provide these funds to be able to either renovate or improve a corner store or grocery store and address the lack of access to healthy foods. This proposal moved out of the House Economic Development Committee last session, and Representative Eddie Rodriguez out of Austin, who's a proponent of as chair of the Food Caucus in the Texas House of Representatives, is a strong proponent of this proposal. So we are looking forward to having a hearing on that legislation soon. The next one is a SNAP incentives proposal that is currently has been filed by Representative Rose, House Bill 3541, and Senator Alvarado, Senate Bill 1834. We all know that Texans need access to affordable and healthy foods and SNAP incentive programs. And so what this proposal does is allow millions of individuals and families with low incomes to buy groceries. We all know that 30% of Texas children benefit from SNAP program, and over half of SNAP recipients in Texas are under the age of 18. And this also encourages locally grown fruits and vegetables to be offered to these SNAP users. And also, it's a win-win for the families and the farmers. So we are currently working, the coalition is on getting a hearing for both these proposals. There are some federal drawdown dollars that, as a result of the 2018 Farm Bill, provides $250 million in federal funding for SNAP incentive programs across the country. So we are working with lawmakers and educating them about the opportunities that exist by utilizing these SNAP incentives for healthy eating, and also the economic impact it'll have in particular communities across Texas. So stay tuned on that proposal. We hopefully will have a hearing in both chambers, I'd say within 10 days. The next one is a bill by Representative Gina Hinojosa of Austin, House Bill 128. The proposal she is pushing has been voted out of the Public Education Committee and is waiting floor debate in the House Calendars Committee. And what that proposal does is require school districts to make accessible a copy of the student's physical fitness assessment report, known as a fitnessgram, and to ensure that the copy of the report goes home to the students. And it can even be done electronically, and the school districts are encouraged to make sure that in the school manual that it's listing that the report will be made available. And we're excited about that opportunity to ensure that the report goes home. With the new revised reports that the Cooper Institute has worked with PE teachers and stakeholders across the state of Texas, the reports are easier to read, user-friendly, and they also provide some suggestions on how to address or improve the physical fitness of the student's report. So we look forward to that one hitting the House floor soon.
you want me to take the next one here?
Sure.
So the next one is similar to the healthy food financing that he mentioned with Representative Rodriguez. This has been Senator Miles and Representative Thierry have been with a coalition of several other folks working on a loan program to, again, improve the access to healthy foods in food deserts. Both these bills have been heard several times over the last 4 or 5 years, 6 years. I think we've been working on this. I don't know if I'm any more optimistic this year than I've been in other years. It's an important bill. The Retail Association tends to shoot this thing down because they think this is kind of a local control issue. So we're going to continue to fight for this, but I think the odds are stacked against us on this one in particular. But again, it's food deserts are something that need to be addressed. The issue is whether it's a city-county issue, and that's what we probably need to be focusing more of our attention with county commissioners and city council members in areas where these are, or whether we're actually going to get some relief at the state level. We're still fighting for some relief at the state level, but I'm being blunt with you. I'm not sure that this one has as much legs as some of the other bills we've talked about. And finally, go ahead.
So the next one is a budget rider, and that's just kind of breaking news. We'll give and again, all these proposals are part of either the Partnership for Healthy Texas or the Texas Public Health Coalition's legislative priorities, made up of all the different players. This last rider, kudos to Joseph McMahon with Mission Readiness and others that have been kind of crafting some language, trying to figure out how do we improve quality, ensure our students are receiving quality physical education. One of the things that after months of discussion we decided to pursue was funding to ensure quality physical educator certification grants would be available. Last night, Mission Readiness was able to have a rider, which is an amendment to the budget, House Bill 1, included that would provide $1 million worth of grants for quality physical education certification. Now, it's obviously we are far from over. The amendment was attached, but it goes to a portion of the budget which is called Article 11, which is the wish list. They wish they can fund it, and it'll be discussed in the final negotiations of the budget discussions when they get to conference committee. So we will probably need some support not only on this, but all the proposals we just covered that we are supporting to get us over the finish line in the last 60 days of the legislative session. So we'll continue to provide updates on the proposals we're supporting through our different tools that we have. But you can, for those of us following along with the slides, you can go ahead and advance to the next slide.
So before we jump into this, there's always areas where we have a proactive agenda. That previous slide were the issues where we're proactively supporting what we would like to refer to as good bills and things that we want to have happen. Then the other thing that happens is you have to play a little bit of defense sometimes, where people that don't see eye to eye with public health voices or have particular complaints about them or have a different perspective on how things should work have laid out their bills. And so we've got a few bills that we're kind of watching that in some ways, some of them may actually be good. They're not part of our priority agenda. Some of them may be vehicles that could incorporate amendments that are bad. So we're just going to talk through a few of those. Quite frankly, we could probably have made this bill or this slide about 100 bills long and we wouldn't have gotten through it. But we've just got some ones that we want to talk about briefly that we'd like you to know about that we're keeping an eye on.
So the first one, obviously there's, with all the school safety issues taking place and the top concern of the legislature, there's a bill that Representative Price, Senator Watson have relating to mental health in schools and incorporating some of these components through the school health advisory committees, which is a great utilization of the work that already is done by our SHACs out in each school district. We don't know exactly, this bill is moving through the process. We don't know all the components or what is going to be required of these school health advisory councils, but we are supportive, obviously, of our SHACs, and we want to make sure they stay in place. In terms of what the components are there additional funding for counseling, identifying suicidal tendencies, etc.? These discussions are happening in committee and through the budget and through the discussions that continue to happen. we just wanted to bring this to your attention. It is a priority. This one is a priority of leadership, and it is continuously moving through the process. And I'll take the next one. Senator Lucio has always been a supporter of school health advisory councils and obesity prevention. He's got a bill that simply adds a nutritionist to the list of people that can serve on the school health advisory councils. That bill has not had a hearing that I'm aware of, but we did want, again, as Tim mentioned, this is something we're just keeping an eye on and seeing where this policy goes.
There's a couple of bills, Senate Bill 4193 by Representative Allison and Senate Bill 1390 by Senator Menendez that acknowledge the crisis of suicide, not only in our state, but in our country, and have challenged the school health advisory committees to take that issue up and discuss it and figure out what they can do with within their local communities. It shouldn't be controversial, but anything related to school health and school health advisory committees sometimes can draw unfriendly amendments and things like that, so we're keeping an eye on this one.
And then the same for the Senate Bill 1854 by Senator Paxton. There's been a little bit of a heightened alert on school health advisory councils by some members of the legislature feeling they need to address some of these shacks for whatever reason they may have, maybe personal or this may be philosophical. Again, this is one we're just monitoring. It requires school health advisory councils to adhere to the Open Meetings Act of the state of Texas. We'll continue to provide updates on this, but we did want this to be on your radar since this is in the world that a lot of our folks that are attending or listening today work with our school health advisory councils.
The next one is kind of an interesting one coming out of Houston. Our state representative, Representative Bohack from the west side of Houston, is concerned that public health people are sliding in human sexuality classes through the school health advisory committees, and he wants to maintain that Texas is an abstinence-only state and that the shacks should be restricted from as he would say, doing nefarious things by talking about things that should remain in families. So we're keeping an eye on that one. I don't think this one necessarily has a big bunch of momentum behind it, but it's out there, and we're keeping an eye on it.
And then the last one we're keeping a track on, again, supporter of our initiative, Senator Lucio, has a bill relating to the marketing of food and unhealthy food in our public schools. Not sure if that's going to get any traction. The coalitions have supported these endeavors in the past. It's good intentions. We just don't know if it's going to have a hearing, or we will continue to lend our support if it goes in a positive impact for our efforts to reduce childhood obesity and impact chronic disease. With that, we can go ahead and move to the next slide. So Tim and I just left a meeting for the Partnership for Healthy Texas this morning, and we meet weekly at the Capitol during the legislative session to go over where pieces of legislation are, as well as what's coming up on the week ahead and where we can work together to advance or defeat or monitor all these proposals. So we wanted to be sure to throw that out there. But also, we did want to make sure everybody is aware there are proposals that are moving through the legislature that do harmful things. And of course, one of the jokes is whenever the legislature is in town, women and children of Texas are not safe. So again, there are some proposals that are impacting a couple of our key programs. The first one that I will address is there's a piece of legislation, both in the House and Senate, they're identical bills, Senate Bill 1376 and House Bill 3638, that if you look at the caption, it really doesn't look like it's addressing our fitness gram, but it's a bill that starts out addressing the State Board of Educator certification. And then at the end, there's a bunch of lines in what we call in our world repealers, just amend or sections of the bill that just delete an existing code in the education code. And that's what this bill does. And real quick summary of how this came about. During the interim, so right before the session, there was a work group of school administrators, a couple of different organizations that were meeting with the Office of Lieutenant Governor regarding what portions of the education code needed to be repealed, were mandates. They were calling it a mandate relief group. At the end of the day, what we were told is they were looking at a way to reduce the length of the education code. This included about 20 recommendations, everything from directing school districts to which type of light bulbs they buy, to doing away with the statewide obesity council. But FitnessGram made one of the recommendations, and so this bill has a portion that repeals the requirement of a physical fitness assessment to be done in public schools. This is a bill that has not had a hearing yet. Some of the concerns were that there was not enough information on what's being done with the data, or that the reports that are going out to the students were not user-friendly. Obviously, many of you, and if you have not received or seen the new report to go to the students, please feel free to email me or contact me on behalf of Cooper Institute. We do have the new reports that have been shared with lawmakers, and that has addressed a major portion of their concern. We're trying to educate them on the utilization of data that's out there. We're working with all our partners. So again, we can't cover everything. So if you do have examples of how the data is used from your school district, your program, your academic institution, we're happy to use that in making the argument about the importance of maintaining the statewide physical fitness assessment in place, and how it impacts academic performance, and impacts also absenteeism, and why we need to keep that in place. And so we'll keep you posted on that. Our coalition is ready to step in and help preserve that effort, but we did want to put this on everybody's radar.
And the issue of repealing the school health advisory committees or councils has come up. That one Dr. Campbell, who's a senator on the Senate side, and Senator Hall, the irony is how important these things are in some communities. We understand that not all of them are fully functioning the way they should, but instead of actually getting in and fixing them, their idea is just to either repeal them or make them optional. We think that's bad public policy. We think school health advisory committees are the best chance that we have to get local school districts to keep the idea of public health and health education and all those comprehensive issues that we really need to see happen alive at the local level. So we'll be fighting these pretty hard. Next slide, please. So Joel's put together a nice list of resources that if you want to follow any of the issues that we've put out there, and even more, quite frankly, if I can point out the Michael and Susan Dell Center for Healthy Living have put together they actually have what most people call their social determinants of health legislative tracker, the one at the very end there. And if we have not hit on the issue that you care about, because we didn't have enough time to list all the bills here, this one is that website is great at really putting all the issues out there. Any bill that you're interested in tracking is right there on that list. The other coalition pieces that are there have talking points specific to the bills that we've talked about. So if you want to kind of see some resources, and if you want to hold one of them up, kind of show you there you go. The Partnership for a Healthy Texas has put together one-pagers. So there are some resources there. You don't have to come up with these things on your own. The information is all there that we try to keep up to date, whether there's amendments or things that are going on with the bills. Anything you want to add to that?
Well, I think if any of you are interested in joining some of these lists, you could populate some of the information, I believe, on the partnership websites, and you can be added to our mailing list. You can get emails when bills are moving or legislative updates. Same for Tobacco 21. There's organizations. If your organization can support the effort, there's forms you can fill out there. But as Tim mentioned, you don't have to reinvent the wheel. All the resources are there on these proposals, talking points, etc. And that's why we wanted to share this with you and make sure you had this available.
And if I can jump in, and the reason this is so important is, as Joel mentioned, the legislature meets every other year for 140 days, okay? So any content of bill, any policy, ideas are negotiable. The one thing that is absolutely not negotiable is time. So and people have paid attention to jumping in and they're like, oh, I want to help, but I don't have time until this summer. Well, thank you very much. I'm glad you want to help, but if you wait until the summer, game's over. The playoffs are over. It's done. There's not a whole lot you can help, but you can start putting things in place for 2021. But the time to help is now. We literally have less than 80 days or 90 days left in the session. It will end May 27th, whether we want it to or not. And so the idea that if we've hit on any issue that you say, hey, I really care about that one, jump on one of these partnership or the public health, log in, get the ability to be notified, and there will be some activity or activations when you can find out when things are happening. And if you do get one of those activations, like, hey, a bill's coming up next Tuesday, and you get that on Friday, calling on Saturday, Sunday, or Monday is good. Calling on Wednesday is bad. The bill's already been heard. It's done. It's passed. So if you get an activation, that activation, those notifications are live and important for those couple of hours, couple of days. And again, it's the only thing we can negotiate is time. So we need you to engage. So if I can quickly transition, and this will answer the question that was just posted up. Next slide, please. Actually, I think we've got one more slide that we wanted to get into on how you can help. So this is the part where if we were all face to face, I'd say raise your hand if you know who your state representative is, and I guess punch in a plus in the chat screen if you know who your state representative is, and punch in 2 pluses if you know who your state senator is as well, because those people, your local state senator, your local state representative, are super important that you know who those people are. And if you don't, the first link that's shown to you on this thing is a representative finder. And the Texas legislature nicely sets up a thing where all you have to do is punch in your address, your personal address. It doesn't keep track. There's no big tracking system. You don't put in your name or your social security number or anything like that, just your address, and it'll tell you who's my congressman, who's my state senator, who's my legislator, and it even tells you who your state school board member is, which a lot of people don't even know they have a school board member for the state board of thing. But the most important thing that we suggest to start with is figure out who your state representative or state senator is.
And it's important, this is your capital. I think Tim mentioned that earlier. It's easy to walk in, find out what's going on, sign up for a committee hearing. But also, as many of you are interested in these policies and we're looking at how to get involved, or if you are, and you just feel like you may need a little coaching or guidance, please reach out to Tim or I. We are happy to have folks come join us at the Capitol, happy to coach them on what needs to happen. If you have visits coming to the Capitol, we're happy to make sure that how we can utilize your time wisely. Tim and I are in the halls every day, so lawmakers get to know us. They know we will wait around 24/7 to see them or talk to them. But if folks from their district come up and want to visit with them, they're going to more likely take the time to visit with you quickly to talk about the issue that you may have concerns with. So one way also to get to know your lawmakers, if you don't have a chance to come to Austin, is subscribe to their newsletters or follow them on Facebook or any of the social media components. Many of them do go home on the weekends and have town hall meetings or coffees. That is the best way to reach out to them, talk to them about an issue, and make it personal. That helps our work in Austin a lot easier. But let us know, because if you have a good conversation with a lawmaker in your district about recess, let us know, because that's a lawmaker that Tim or I can go follow up with. They might have been on the fence. We could get them with your help to vote for a bill or to help us defeat an amendment. And so social media, lawmakers constantly are using Twitter, Instagram, and Facebook to communicate with their lawmakers. Don't be shy. Follow them, communicate with them, register your support for a bill or against a bill, and let them know. It's just as quick than emailing sometimes. And lawmakers literally have their phones on the House or Senate floor and are following those conversations.
This is a good time for me to jump in and talk, because this issue ends up being raised by public health people all the time. We understand that a lot of public health people work for public entities. I know some of you work for cities and counties, some of you work for universities, some of you work for nonprofits. And a lot of people feel like, well, because I work for a city or a county or a nonprofit, I'm not allowed to do anything. Well, wrong. This is still an open government, participatory government. It works when people that know the issues participate. It doesn't work when people who know the issues don't participate, because the people who fill that void, as a matter of fact, Joel and I walked through a crowd of them to get to our office here to do this with you. There's a crowd of anti-vaxxers that have absolutely no public health or scientific knowledge between the whole lot of them, that I'm assuming every single one of you on this call probably could run circles around the collection of bumbling idiots that are up there. No offense to the people up there. I'm sure they're wonderfully nice people. They're just poorly informed and have no science background whatsoever. Anyways, that being said, how can you do this if you work for a city or a county health department, or you're at a university or a nonprofit? First of all, know what your organization's policy is towards activism on company time. Most of you will have caveats that they say when you're on the company time, when you're in your office, when you're on the company time, please don't do anything while you're on and speaking potentially on behalf of the organization. So learn what your organization stands for and what their tolerance is for you to get involved. First of all, that's the most important thing. The second thing is, and this is the safest way to get involved, is don't do anything from work. Do these things from your personal email. Do these things from your personal phone. Do these things from your personal address, but you are still an American citizen. You are a voting American citizen, and you have every right to say, my name is Dr. So-and-so, here's what I care about, and please vote yes or no on this bill. What you don't want to do is say, I'm Dr. So-and-so, and I'm speaking on behalf of the coalition for blah, blah, blah. When you start talking on behalf of someone, that's when you can kind of get into an area where people get a little nervous. But that doesn't mean you can't do it on your own. At any time, you are more than welcome to do that. We have people that will take a vacation day to get involved and come down to the Capitol and testify on issues, both for and against. And you're more than welcome to do that at any time. But that's one of those, I guess, issues that I know is raised oftentimes in the public health world, and it has paralyzed people. I had a long conversation with our local health department director, and he was very frustrated that when he goes to his coalition meetings, there's hundreds of people there, and then when a bill comes up that will impact something very important, he'll be up there testifying, and he turns around and there's no one else in the room. And he'll find out that no one sent an email, no one did anything. And I think a lot of it is because of the misinformation that is spread, that because you work in an organization, because you do something, you can't engage. You can engage. You just need to do it on your time. The last area that I want to talk about a little bit, particular to public health, because again, people feel very nervous engaging, is you are always also allowed to be a resource witness. Usually you want to talk to your organization. You say, I'm not going to go down there and I'm not going to testify for or against a bill. And I'll use the recess example. You know, I'm a teacher at a school. I can't go down and testify for or against a bill. But you can come down and you can be a resource witness. What does that mean? It means that you sign in and you say you're on the bill and that you are here talking about the good public policy that may be included in a bill, but you're not going to say those magic words of I'm either for or against a bill in your official capacity. You're going to talk about the policy. That may sound like it's splitting hairs. It is a little bit, but that's the law of the land. That's how this is the way Texas works. This is the way the country works. So those are a few of the little caveats. We're happy to answer specific questions. Again, Joel and I work with folks in your capacity all the time, and we make sure that we don't get you in trouble. It doesn't help anybody if we get you in trouble, and that we don't want to get you in trouble. We want to get you active. We want you to get participating, but we also want you to do so in a way that is aligned with your organization, is aligned with the direction you're going, and makes good sense along the way.
And one thing I'll add as well is we work with a lot of folks in our coalition and the public health world, but if you think you come across a piece of research or data that can help us on our arguments, whether it be for recess, for child care standards, or for physical fitness assessment data, share it with us. We don't have it all, and sometimes that most current piece of data will help us get over the goal line or fend off something harmful. So yes, please share information with you. There's so many ways to impact a piece of policy, whether it's coming up here in person, getting involved remotely through an email or a phone call to your lawmaker, to sharing data or success stories. We can use that and would appreciate you sharing with that as much as you can. I think with that, we're ready to go. I can't remember if we have one more slide after this, so we can see where we are.
Yeah, so this is the part where the questions come up, and I love the question, what is the best way to contact your legislator, I'm sorry, and I would say all of the above, but I will say certain things have more impact than others. Right now, because email is so easy to do, and you can blast email, there's spam email, there's all the things that go on. Does it have an impact? On a scale of 1 to 10, 10 being extremely impactful and 1 being not very impactful, I would say emails are better than 0 or 1, which is not participating, but it really doesn't get above a 3 or a 4. I think phone calls score about a 6 or a 7 on effectiveness because you're going to call the specific office. Usually somebody between the ages of 19 and 23 will probably answer the phone. They're usually college students from one of our universities that are doing an internship. They're trying to get some experience in this. They're fairly clueless and young, but they will take your information. You basically have to call them up. You say your name, where you're from, you're for this bill. They'll write it down. They put it on the tracking sheet. They keep track and they inform their boss of everything that's going on when people call in. And that's actually not a bad way. If you want to get up a little higher in the 1 to 10 scale, I'd put the personal visits coming to the Capitol around an 8 or a 9, and that is extremely effective. Again, you'll probably meet with a staffer. If you so the only way you get to a 10 in the way to do it is, quite frankly, have a relationship with your elected official, which means A, you got to know who they are. B, you got to reach out to them during the year and a half in between the legislative session and establish a relationship so they look to you as a thought leader on this issue, and they actually understand the issues that you care about and you've influenced them. And a lot of people are kind of cynical in this country where I hear, well, I don't write a big enough check, I don't have a PAC, blah, blah, blah. You know what? Some of the most effective people I've ever known are just people that spent the time to pick up the phone and call their senator, call their representative, ask to go in and have a meeting with them. I used to work for a state senator from Arlington, and any health bill that came up, he didn't call the associations. He didn't call the local lobbyists. He didn't call Joel or I. He had a friend that was a doctor, and he would call up his friend that was a doctor and say, hey, doc, here's what we're talking about. How does that impact patients? How does that impact you personally? That doctor never wrote him a check. They were just friends. So if you really want to get to that kind of level 10, get to know your person. One of the most influential people that actually influenced a congressman was one of his neighbors a couple of doors down, and he said every once in a while they'd be going to get their mail, and he'd bump into the congressman and tell him about an issue, and the next thing you knew, the congressman would be working on that issue. So relationships matter in this game, but relationships where you know your information is even better. So I would put that kind of on a scale of 1 to 10. Anything you want to add to that, Joel?
I think Tim's right on. The other thing I would add is when you do meet with a chief of staff or a legislative director or assistant for a lawmaker's office, keep in mind that meeting is just as important, because right now in these final days of the session, they spend more time with lawmakers than the lawmakers spend with their own families. So by you talking to that chief of staff or that legislative director, that message will get across to that lawmaker. So don't feel discouraged if you just talk to that person. Obviously, if you want to have a visit with them, try to schedule it. Drop-bys right now are okay, but they're not as productive, and time is limited, so you have to have your message in sound bites and bullet points. And again, Tim and I are happy to help, and if any of you are here and are coming up to Austin or thinking about it, we always welcome more new blood to the Capitol. And of course, this is a time we have allotted for questions, so if anybody wants to type in a question in their chat, in the chat box, Tim and I are happy to take those. And also, there's plenty to do at the Capitol. There's plenty of opportunity for people to get involved. There are key issues that need your help to get through the goal line, both proposing legislation and defeating legislation.
Wonderful. Thank you, Joel and Tim. This has been a great presentation. As they said, we will take questions at this time, so please type any questions you have into the chat box. And we do still have time for several more questions, so please type those into the chat box and we will be able to have our great presenters here give us some answers. For someone who would like to reach advocacy impact on school health education, physical activity, physical education policy, what would your advice be on asking the right research questions?
Okay, let me jump into that one. So when people ask me kind of what is the right question, I always like to do just a quick, a little quick 101 on what I call the policy cycle. And the policy cycle, in my mind, is pretty simple and obvious. But again, I come at it from a bit of a science background. First of all, what's the problem you want to fix? Figure out what is the worst issue, or what is an issue that you're passionate about in your community. What's broken, right? And identify what's broken. Figure out what is it. So when we talk about childhood obesity, we spent months in Houston figuring out what is the data, what are the zip codes that are worse than others, and then why is it broken? Why do we have such an emerging crisis of childhood obesity in Texas? Well, it turns out we ended up coming up with about 14 or 15 different reasons and areas of concern, and then we organized those into kind of 3 categories. But the first part of it was, don't worry about the recommendations, don't worry about the solution yet. Figure out if you can really break down a problem, really figure out what the issue is that you want to attack. And then after you've kind of written it up, you've figured out what exactly the problem is, articulate that specific component of it. So for example, part of the reason we're working on this child care licensing piece is that we've learned that a lot of our children that are in child care now versus 20 years ago is the screen time. The amount of time kids are put in front of iPads and TVs and all the other things instead of out playing and outside, or even in a gym or anywhere where the kids can run around and build things and do things and play and be kids. And so we've got to reduce the amount of screen time. We spent a lot of time on that issue. But then, so once you've articulated a specific area of a problem that you want to work on, the next part, the next quadrant of the cycle is, okay, so what are we going to do about it? And in order to know what you're going to do about it, you have to articulate, well, who controls this issue? Is this a local issue? Is this a business issue? Is this something that's only happening in my school district or in my community? Or is this more broadly happening across the entire state of Texas? And then once you've figured out and are, okay, well, here's the area or the level of government, then you have to write up a recommendation in order to fix this problem. We think that if you change the law to do X, Y, or Z, we've got a recommendation, and then test it. Talk to your friends, talk to your coworkers, talk to your other experts in the field. Hey, if we changed X, if we made the recommendation to change X, would it fix the problem? And that's that first 50% of the policy cycle. Doesn't have anything to do with legislation yet. It's still articulating exactly where you get to. The next quadrant is really the advocacy and public policy quadrant, and that's where you say, okay, I do want to change something. I want to see it changed in our school district. I want to see it changed across the state, whatever it is, but you get engaged. And this is oftentimes where I see the public health community get kind of quiet. They write up this great research paper on what's broken. They write up a set of recommendations. They publish and they say, this is what would fix the problem, but they don't do anything with it. That quadrant, to me, the third quadrant is figuring out how to get that implemented. You fight for funding if you need funding. You fight for policy if you need policy. Oftentimes it's both. And that's where you fight. And then the last quadrant, just quickly, is the evaluation piece. And if you haven't thought through your problem statement and your recommendation as to how to measure whether you've made progress, you're missing the opportunity to close the loop. You have to close the loop with evaluation. Are we making a change? Are we doing what we said we were going to do? And if you get to the top and the answer is no, then you got to start all over, run that cycle again. So there is no perfect question. There is no perfect direction. The direction that I like to advise people to figure out is, A, figure out what you're passionate about, figure out what you think the issues are in your community, and engage, because that's where you're probably going to get the best support. You're going to get the most opportunity to make a change.
Okay, great. If you have any questions, please enter them into your chat box. All audience members have their microphones muted, so you will not be able to ask the questions by voice. The next question, can you tell me what you see on the horizon for school lunch policy? I work in a district around Houston, and the system is broken and harmful.
Hmm. I think there's going to be a lot of local efforts that are going to have to rise up to the top to address the school lunch policy with our Department of Agriculture. Um, I think it's a challenge from the national level down. The whole local control argument has unfortunately changed some of the school lunch policies that have had a lot of our stakeholders play defense with preserving what's on place in the school lunch policy arenas. I think there's a lot of great programs that are starting to pay attention to that and figure out how to engage farmers, some of the folks that grow, and the educational components that teach kids how to grow their food that will maybe generate and encourage more healthy school lunch options at the local level and reinforcing what's done at the state level and national level. So the answer to that is right now we need to continue playing defense and holding on in Texas to what little we have on the school lunch policy and trying to increase awareness. And I think we're at a good place in Texas, politically minded in terms of needing to address children's health and nutrition policies. It's just going to take a little time of raising that awareness and getting some stakeholders and regulatory being the agency folks, the Department of Agriculture, and maybe some larger health directors across Texas to help us get those policies strengthened.
Yeah, the only thing I would add to that is if you really are seeing things in your local community, that school health advisory committee and your school board are the first line of influence where you can really jump in and see something fixed. Don't try to fix the whole state or nation right away. Get into your school district. Talk to one of your school board members. Talk to the people that are on the school health advisory committee. Call up your superintendent and figure out what they're doing, because I don't disagree. I think we've a lot of school districts have done some creative contracting with various food supply companies that have subverted some of the good health policy that was drafted by former Ag Commissioner Susan Combs. She was very instrumental in improving the quality of school lunches and food in the schools. She's the one that got the sugar sweetened beverages out of our schools. But unfortunately, since she retired, I think a lot of her momentum, particularly in Texas, has faded, and we need to reinvigorate that. And I really do believe, along with what Joel mentioned, is we've got to build it from the ground up, because I don't see the kind of activity at the state or national level.
All right, if you have a question, please enter it into the chat window and our speakers will answer that for you. While
Leah,
we're waiting.
Questions for us?
Yes, I was just going to say, while we're waiting to see if there's any more questions, what's the likelihood? You talked about 2 healthy food financing type bills. Is it likely that those will be merged or that efforts will be combined? And what exactly do those kinds of bills provide? Is it funding sources to support local HFFI type projects, or does it need to go to an existing local HFFI program?
So what they provide is, yeah, it's kind of a public-private partnership on the funding. They're going to require some type of state investment to be able to draw down some private dollars. Will they get merged? I don't know. Could be. We are just hoping that one of them will get a hearing. And there was bipartisan support last session on the HFFI bill that Representative Eddie Rodriguez pushed. There was a lot of business support in terms of realizing that the dollars not only could be used to ensure there was fresh fruits and vegetables or healthier food options located in an underserved area, but the dollars could be used for infrastructure in terms of restoration, or not so much renovation, but ensuring the outfitting those convenience stores, corner stores, potential grocery stores to refrigeration components to be able to provide the milk, the meat, et cetera, healthier options, the job training that went with it. So the answer to the question is public-private dollars will be necessary. Two, I don't know if they would be merged, being the corner store and the grocery access issue, but they will also provide economic incentives in the communities. So I think given the fact that lawmakers are looking for ways to be very pro-business in Texas, they have a good shot of doing the healthy food financing initiative first, but I would imagine that we will see over the next 10 days, if those bills start moving, then there's probably some good opportunities there.
Okay, great. We have another question. Health education requirements for high school students were cut in 2009. Has this been considered, or is it being brought forward at this time?
Yeah, that's a great question. As most of you probably know, it was moved from the mandatory requirement for graduation to optional requirement, and as each year has ticked on, more school districts have actually moved health education to optional, and in some school districts we've learned now they don't even offer health education anymore in their schools, so it's not even part of the graduation requirement. We've pushed hard at the legislature to find some champions that want to reestablish that. I would say we haven't made a whole lot of progress in finding champions who want to jump into this battle, and the reason is pretty simple. Those three little scary letters in Texas, SEX. Can't talk about that. And so unfortunately, good health education, which, believe it or not, sex is only a small portion of what was in the health education curriculum, has made this the uncomfortable topic that legislators run away from, and they don't want to do it. Is it possible that health education comes around and becomes a requirement again across the state? Unless things change at the ballot box, I'm going to say no.
Yeah, to piggyback on Tim, there is some interest at the legislature, but they're very cautious of how this is done. There wasn't a bill filed per se, but there's interest in maybe amending something to avoid the full open discussion on sex education. We know, having worked with the PE teachers across Texas, health education, that course is the one course where a lot of the programs that are required of school districts to be taught, the PAPA program, et cetera, that's where those courses can be taught in the health education. And it also establishes a health awareness component in a student for that can set them on a healthy pattern for their life. So there, as Tim mentioned, it's going to take a little bit of while. I think we've got some lawmakers that are interested, and then we'll see how the amendment process goes this session. But there's also the scare tactics from the other side and the debunking of these myths that unfortunately, this session, I've never seen it quite like this. There's a lot of that propaganda out there that's making us play defense and setting us back when we make a little bit of a step. So that's why we had a bill that we thought we were going to get followed, and we had some lawmakers say, we'd rather run with an amendment right now because of everything going out there. So we, as a partnership, do support that initiative. We'll work with our stakeholders to see if we can find a venue, but we also want to be realistic. It's going to be a challenge. And also keep in mind, given the fact that school finance and school safety are taking a brunt of the load, while they too could go hand in hand with health education, we have a lot of the same champions on those issues that we can't go too much to the well, per se, for favors.
If I could add one more thing about health education in particular that I learned last session, because we had a bill last session that we were working on. While I jokingly say there's no pro-obesity campaign out there that opposes us, oftentimes when you put policy forward, somebody else who sees their agenda reduced a little bit may come out against your bill. And what happened was that the TMEA, and for those of you who are unfamiliar with that, that's a Texas Music Educators and Arts Association. I think there's 2 A's in there. They actually were instrumental in getting health education reduced to an optional requirement because they felt like health education was causing kids to have to drop out of music and arts. And so they have defended and will continue to defend that school districts need to set this policy, and that music and arts are equally, if not more important than health education. And so we tried to negotiate with them last session. The issue is that is the word requirement, and that's where they kind of freak out, and they feel like they've made a lot of progress in getting music and arts back into the high schools, and that if we were to get this health education thing, that it would cause them a problem. So it was an odd discussion, and we had all sorts of kind of, don't you want your kids that are playing in the band and doing great art and in theater, don't you want them to be healthy and know about healthy living for the rest of their lives? And they would be like, oh yeah, that's kind of important, but we just don't want it to be a mandate. So it's one of the frustrating kind of stories of how things play out in the legislative process.
Very interesting. All right, well, we are right at the end of our time, so I'm gonna stop the question and answer period at that point. I wanna thank our speakers, Joel and Tim, for taking the time today to give us this very informative presentation. We did have one comment in the chat box that said, not a question, but a compliment on the excellent presentation and great advice. Nice job. And I will echo that as well. Thank you so much, gentlemen, on behalf of Live Smart Texas and all of us who joined today for providing us this valuable information.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you everyone for joining the webinar today. We appreciate you being here. Remember, this webinar will be archived at msdcenter.org. Thanks again for joining us today, and we will see you next time.
Good job. Thank you, sir.
Nicely.
Love to see who else on there.